Hey everyone. Welcome to the return of Tony's Media Podcast. I started doing political videos again, and I didn't want to mess up the screenwriting stuff too much, so I was going to tie this one into screenwriting, but it would have been about as close as the last one I did, a screenwriter's rant. Say hi, Joan. Joan's here. So I decided to bring back the media podcast. So here it is. Today we're going to talk about Joe Biden. And I got a few things. I got to get in on this Biden take because being a South Jersey resident, I've heard about Joe Biden for a long time. He's, before the VP, he was senator in Delaware, and he's probably a congressman before that. So he's been in, him and his late son, tragic death there, they were in Delaware politics for a long time. So, you'd watch the news, you hear about the Bidens, they're movers and shakers down here. And so this creepy Joe Biden thing, and I'm a guy who considers himself fairly tuned in to media. But when I first heard the creepy Joe Biden thing, which was about, I guess the first time I heard it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. The first time I heard it, I was just like, well, he's just he's not being a creep, he's being a grandfather. And let me state right up front, I don't think he's like a pedophile or anything. No. But he is, in my opinion, a little too grabby. He's just weird. Kind of like Michael Jackson is weird. Or was weird, I should say. I don't think Michael Jackson's a pedophile. I just think he was a weird guy whose behavior was then interpreted as being that. And then people invested in that myth. And then, never stopped. Even after he's dead. With Biden, I think it's a similar thing. I don't think he's really, a pedophile or anything like that. I think he's just an odd guy. And the reason I say that is because people, and I include myself in this take, you don't learn everything in the order you're supposed to. Sometimes you learn things late in life, and I've done that. I just cleaned up this stupid video channel. I've had it for like 10 years, and I finally figured out the software. Sometimes you're just late on picking up on things. So I'll give you a couple examples. So when I was in high school, I guess it was junior high, I have a friend who, still friends with him, he likes to mess with people. He just likes to mess with you. And he's really good at it. So when he messes with you, what he used to do in high school is he used to tell you what would sound like a fact, but it was really ridiculous, and try to convince you it was true. And he would look you square in the eye and just keep telling you, oh yeah, this is true. No reason, just to mess with you, just to convince you it was true, and then wait, and then when you told somebody else, he'd laugh because, you're an idiot for believing him. And I swear to God he did this. He had this kid convinced, and now the kid's we're only like around 14 or 15 at the time, but he had this kid in my class convinced that lesbians have green feet. And he had this whole weird justification for it, and the kid was absolutely convinced. He was just totally convinced, and then he eventually told other people, and then it got around the school, and we were all laughing at him because it was one of my friend's crazy mind fucks. And he used to do stuff all that at the time. Now, eventually, I guess this kid, probably because we all laughed at him, finally, began to suspect, oh man, I think I've been hosed here. And I assume he doesn't believe it anymore. But the thing is, people hear that kind of stuff, maybe not that ridiculous. I mean, that was an extreme example, but they just don't learn the things they need to learn sometimes. They put 2 and 2 together, get 5, and they just go along with that because nobody corrects them. No one corrects them and says, no, you're wrong. So the other example I have, and this is a bit of a long story, but it's a funny story. So back in the day, I used to do this TV show called The Comic Book Show. It was back in the early '90s, and I wanted to meet some friends at the casino in AC. So my co-host said, "Oh, I'll go," and then her friend was the makeup girl, and she said, "Oh, I'll go too." I said, "Okay." I said, "Why don't you guys drive to my house, and then you can leave your car there, and we'll go down." And the makeup girl was like, "No, I'll drive. I'll drive the whole way." I said, "Really?" Now I've always had like an old car, so I was like kind of down with that because that saves wear and tear on my car. So she said, "Oh," I said, "Okay, yeah, you're gonna drive, sure." So we're driving down, and about 2/3 of the way, the car's starting to make noise and it's having problems. I'm like, what's wrong with your car? And she goes, "I don't know. It's been making that noise for a while now." And I'm like, "Didn't you get it fixed or anything?" She's like, "Nah, I don't really know anything about cars. I don't have money to fix it." "Do you know anything about cars?" And I barely know anything about cars, but the one thing I know is you got to change the oil. So I said, "When's the last time you changed the oil?" And I swear to you, she looks at me and goes, "Change the oil? What do you mean?" I go, "You have to change the oil in a car. Everybody knows that." She goes, I didn't know that." Now this woman was like at least the mid-20s, maybe approaching 30. She didn't know you have to change the oil in a car. Like, had no idea. I said, "Let me get this straight. You have never changed the oil in this car?" And she says, "No." I said, "How long have you had the car?" She's like, "I don't know, 5 or 6 years." 5 or 6 years she drove. I don't know how you drive a car that long without changing the oil, but she did it. And now the car was dying and overheating. So we managed to get to AC, and I was like, "Well, let the car cool down. We'll go do casino stuff, and then we'll come back and we'll deal with this. There's no sense dealing with it now." So we did that. We went to the casino, had some fun, came back. Now we're dealing with the car. I said, "Well, let me check the oil." So I pulled a dipstick out, and I swear to you, it had oil flakes on it. Literally all the oil in it had, I guess, evaporated or used up all the liquid that was inside the oil. I don't think oil can evaporate. Maybe it can. I don't know. But there was nothing on the dipstick but flakes of what was once oil. So I said, "Well, we got to get some oil. That's the only solution I can see." So we went to a mini mart, and I got a quart of oil, and I poured a whole thing in. And it just goes in. And I checked the dipstick, and there's still nothing. I'm like, better get another quart of oil. So I pour a second quart in. So now I got 2 quarts of oil in this thing, and I assume, since it had no oil in it whatsoever, that 2 quarts of oil is going to help it. Now I put it in and check it, and I think I was getting a little bit of oil, and then we start driving. Long story, slightly longer. The car died on us. The gasket blew. I guess, so long without the oil, it couldn't take the oil. And we ended up on the side of the road, and I didn't get home that night. Ended up having to take a bus home and walk 5 miles. And I had a meeting the next day at like 9 o'clock. I didn't get home till like 6. It was a nightmare. But it was all because this woman didn't know the very basics of car ownership, which is, for those of you who don't know, you have to change your oil about every 2,000 miles, 2 to 3,000. Synthetic, you can go 4 or 5. You can go even longer, really. It's not great for your car, but, you got to change the oil. She didn't know that. Grown woman, driving a car, lost her car. The car was dead. Oh, she blew a gasket. It was over. Whole engine seized, done. So, how does this connect to Joe Biden? I don't think Joe Biden's been corrected. I don't think Joe Biden's been doing this for so long and getting away with it, essentially. Why would he stop? Nobody likes that uncomfortable moment when somebody tells you something, "Hey, you're being stupid." I don't like it. No. I mean, you probably put something in the comments of something stupid I did, and I'll go, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, you got to be like taken aside and corrected. And you have to be willing to accept that criticism too. If you're not in the mind frame of that, even if you're really, really wrong and have embarrassed yourself, you're going to rationalize it in some way. Now imagine this guy who, has become powerful. Now nobody wants to correct him. I mean, maybe back in the day, when he was I assume a lawyer, and he did something like that, it was all good, because probably when he was a lawyer, it was like the 60s, and who cares? Like, nobody cared about this crap. So now it's like an issue. Now it's 2019, and it's an issue. So no one has corrected him in all these years. He's not evolved with other people who have been corrected. And it could have worked out that way. Like, someone in the 70s could have said, "Oh, Joe, getting a little grabby there. It's not cool anymore." And at that point, maybe he'd have gone, "Oh, okay, I got to think about that." And maybe he wouldn't have done it right away. But certainly by the 80s or 90s, people corrected him. He probably would have went, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I should stop this kind of stuff. I should take a look at myself and what I'm doing." But people who are rich and powerful, they tend not to get corrected. People around them want their favor. And so what are you going to do? You're going to meet Joe Biden and go, "Oh, Joe, what the hell? The hell are you doing to my daughter? Get off of her." Like, who's going to do that to the vice president of the United States? Certainly not the people he's being videotaped and photographed with. Maybe some rando on the street, if some rando on the street gets that close to the VP. But once you're the VP, no one's going to get that close to you. And now everything's coming out because he's running for president, and they're scrutinizing the hell out of him. So now it comes out he may have grabbed, allegedly, a secret agent's girlfriend, and the agent got so mad he nearly punched Biden. He shoved him, and was probably winding up to punch him, I guess. Turns out the Secret Service guy got suspended for a week. Now, think of it this way. If that Secret Service guy had just shoved Biden, do you think he'd be working? No way. It's the reason he still got his job. It's because they all knew, probably, Biden's rep. And apparently Biden's had this rep for a long time. And when I first tuned into this, I was just like, could this really be happening? Could this really be? I mean, Joe Biden? Why would he do that? Maybe I assume that, maybe in the past, maybe back in the 80s with his kids, or, his friends' kids that he's a little familiar with. Then about 2 or 3 years ago, I saw Paul Joseph Watson has a montage of creepy Joe Biden. And let me tell you something. You should Google it and watch it. It is creepy. And it's recent. And these are mostly children who, Biden doesn't know them. He sort of knows their families. I guess he knows their dads mostly, and I assume their mothers. He's meeting other Democrats, and he goes right for the little girls. And people are uncomfortable, okay? And again, I'm not saying the guy's a pedophile. I don't think he is. I think he's a bit of a weirdo, and no one has corrected him. No one. And he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong, and he's got a bit of an ego. And it's like, F you. I'm not gonna change my behavior. It's fine. It's fine. You're overreacting. That's probably what Biden's been saying for 40 plus years. You're overreacting. I'm just being grandfatherly. I'm an old man. I'm not doing anything. That's his reaction. But he doesn't see the optics. He just doesn't say it. On top of that, there's another rumor that he liked to walk around the VP residence totally naked, and that the female Secret Service agents had a bit of a problem with that. Now, on that point, first off, I kind of see it, because a guy that age, he comes from a time when people walk around naked in their homes, and they're kind of used to that freedom of walking around naked, and they see the Secret Service, I would say, as, oh, you just got to put up with that. You're like doctors. So I don't think that's that bad. I don't see that as sexually harassing anybody. I don't think he's doing it to sexually harass the female agents. I think he's just doing it because he's an old man. He doesn't care, and that's the way he's lived his life. He doesn't like to swim with any bathing suit on because he's from that era. I'm sure back in the 30s or 40s or whenever he was a kid, he'd just strip off his clothes and jump in the old swimming hole. So I don't think that is that bad, but it's definitely creepy that he's touching, that he would touch anybody's child in such a familiar way. And I'm telling you, see the video, because it is a bit much. It is a bit. It's definitely enough that I would say, "Oh, come on, what are you doing? Don't touch her face." And if he said anything, like, what? What's the big deal? I'd be like, "You're touching her face. You're shaking everybody's hand. I'm not saying it's a sexual thing. I'm just saying it's weird, and you got stuff on your hands, and you shouldn't be touching, if it was my daughter, my daughter's face with your hands like that. You're not her grandfather, you're not her dad or anything like that. Don't touch her like that." Like somebody needed to do that. But that's never going to happen because Biden's too powerful, and people once you say something like that in public, first off, you're going to embarrass them. And second off, it's going to be a big news story, right? So somebody needs to take him aside in private and say, "Hey, man, don't do that." But you can imagine his reaction. His reaction is going to be like, "Well, F this guy. He's out of my circle. I'm a powerful guy. I don't need this." Now, the topper to this whole thing is Biden just gave a speech about changing the culture of the white man. Like, here's a guy who's totally abusing his position, in my view, touching people's daughters and wives and girlfriends and whatnot, which he should not do. Even, in polite society. Think about it. You meet a total stranger. Maybe he's a little high and mighty. Maybe he's a rich guy or a slightly powerful guy, mayor, let's say. And he manhandles your daughter. It's a little weird. It's different if he's sitting down and the kid comes up to him and he goes, "Hey, you want to sit on my lap?" That's grandfatherly. That's not weird. You ask the kid the permission just to go over and "Here, Joan, I'll demonstrate with Joan the kind of stuff he did." I don't know if you can see Joan, but he's talking and he's mushing her face. He's mushing her face. Joan's loving it, but a little girl, you're not gonna like this. This is weird. What's their face touch that? And then he's smelling the hair. It's weird. You gotta admit it's weird. Again, I'm not saying the guy's a pedophile. I'm just saying he's being weird. No one corrected him all this time. And now, you could forget about being president. I didn't think he was going to beat Trump anyway, but it's weird. But he gives this speech, calling out the culture of the white man because of English common law. And there's another video you should check out. Sargon of Akkad has a video on Joe Biden's speech. You can Google that. And he's mad, boy. Sargon's mad. He's English, and he knows English common law probably better than me, certainly. And he just calls Biden out. But, Biden's not going to see that. Biden's not watching YouTube videos. Biden's not going to take that from anybody. Somebody, of equal status would have to call him aside and say, "Hey, man, you really shouldn't be doing that. The optics on that are horrific, and you should say something." At this point, he's going to have to address it. He'd come out and say, "Hey, listen, if anybody was uncomfortable, I grabbed him. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to make people uncomfortable. I'm an old man, and I'm very tactile or whatever. I'm not going to do it anymore." That's what he should say. He should announce that he's never going to do it again, and then not do it. And be very clear, not that he needs to apologize, because in politics you should never really apologize. You should just say, "Well, I'm not going to do that anymore." Or, at worst, you could say, "Well, maybe I made a mistake, But whatever. But I don't think that's really going to help him, and I certainly don't think it's going to help him to complain about the white man and the culture of the white man at a speech when he's a white guy running for president. I mean, doesn't that, if the white man's so terrible, don't run, Joe. Shouldn't you be out there saying, okay, white men, don't run for president? I mean, it's just stupid. It's just stupid to even say stuff like that. And, as someone online said, you can always test, and it was probably Sargon, I think, you can always test if something sounds racist by just taking the ethnic group out and substituting with others and see if it sounds racist. So when you say, we got to change the culture of the white man, you could substitute other races in there, and it sounds kind of racist. And that usually means because it is. And basing any kind of policy on race is just horrific. That's a road nobody wants to go down. I mean, it doesn't matter what side, what race you're talking about. Basing a policy on race is bad. It was bad when people did it in the past. The Jim Crow laws were horrible. They should be off the books. They're not off the books, by the way. They're just superseded by the civil rights laws. But they should be off the books. I mean, they should be gone. They should be rescinded and removed. Remove that, because if, God forbid, somebody rescinded the civil rights law, it would revert back to the Jim Crow laws. You don't want that. Take them off the books. That's what they should have done. That's what the civil rights legislation should have done. Not make more laws. Remove the bad ones. I don't think there's any part of Jim Crow we want to keep. Is there? Get rid of it. So, it's just ridiculous. Biden is so old to be playing identity politics and trying to get in on the social justice warriors. He was vice president for 8 years. He was senator for God knows how long. You're telling me that this guy is suddenly woke? Suddenly he's going to get out there and he's really going to change things for everybody? No, he's not. He's tapped into what the Democratic Party unfortunately has turned into. And I was a Democrat for many years, and I, being from New Jersey, everybody here is a Democrat just about, but, back in the 80s, at least there was some semblance of something there. Supporting the working man, supporting unions. There was still a little bit of populism left in the Democratic Party back then. Now it's seems like it's all gone. I mean, the only guy who's even remotely populist seems to be Bernie Sanders, and he's so populist he's gone completely red. I wouldn't support that. Economically, it wouldn't work. And so really, without Biden, who do the Democrats have? And I'll say this: H.A. Goodman is another guy I watch. He's been calling that Hillary Clinton's going to run. And just like a lot of people, I said, you got to be kidding me. No way. But, now that Biden's out, I can't see. The Democratic Party didn't want Bernie the first time. Went through a lot of trouble, in my view, to get rid of him. So, who are they going to rally behind? I don't see any of these other guys. So that... I think maybe H.A. could be right. She keeps saying she's still going to wait until the Mueller report fully comes out. I don't know. I think he could be right. So, with this thing with Biden, I don't know why you would... I could still separate his policies from his odd behavior. And I think to a large extent, his behavior just becomes a distraction, and his weird posturing about changing white culture is also posturing. It's just all a distraction from, what policies does this guy support? Does he support what Obama did? Well, you got to think he does. He was his VP for 8 years. I personally did not like a lot of the policies of the Obama administration. One that's really hitting home now, and a lot of people I was talking about this with a friend, is the Cash for Clunkers program. It was a program that on its surface looked like it was doing something good. Oh, let's get rid of all the old cars off the road. But the reality is what it did was it killed the market for cheap used cars. I used to buy cars for about $500 and drive them into the ground. And that was the kind of cars I could afford. I did it for years. After Cash for Clunkers, buying a used car shot up. You got a minimum now, you got to spend like $2 or $3 to get a car that really used to cost you like $500. Now, at $500, if you drive the thing for a year, you got a good deal. Drive the thing for 6 months, that's a good deal. It's like less than $100 a month. $3,000, you got to make that car last, right? A $500 clunker is not worth $3,000, and yet that's what's left on the road now, and they're not better. Those cars aren't better than the $500 clunkers I used to drive, because I was looking for a car at one point, and that's what I was looking at. And the clunker that I was driving was worth at least as much. It was going for that much, if not more. So I ended up keeping my car longer and longer and put more money into it. And that thing was falling apart. Thank God I was able to get a new car. Not that I could afford it. I got a handout, but damn, it was scary. It was a scary time for me. And I missed those $500 cars, and the Cash for Clunkers ruined them all. And, that was the unintended consequences. And who did that impact? It impacted poor people. I'm not a rich guy. I'm not saying I'm in poverty land, although I'm pretty poor. I'm not like poor. I got a house and, I struggle, but there are people much poorer than me that's it. I mean, $500 car, that would be like a luxury, and they need that car to go to work. And Cash for Clunkers, that just drove it skewed the market for used cars, and now they're worth twos of thousands of dollars. So it's going to be a few years before those clunkers come back down in price, and there's enough of them on the road. And the other problem too is the newer cars have all these computers in them, and once the computer breaks, man, you're screwed. The whole car won't work. So the idea that you're going to be able to fix your own car now, it was at least in the ballpark for me back in the 80s when I got a car from the 60s or 70s. Like, it was just mechanical. Like, I actually did a few repairs that I was pretty proud of, or at least I'd go to the junkyard and get the piece. You can't go to a junkyard and get an old motherboard and put it in your car and have it work. Thing's too temperamental. So once your computer goes in your car, is it even going to start? So that was the downstream effects to just a small program like Cash for Clunkers. And that's the kind of stuff Obama did all the time. And, a guy like Biden, certainly being a Democrat, is going to come, he's talking about changing the culture. Who is he to change the culture? Some old white dude? First off, by his own logic, by their own weird SJW logic, that can't possibly work. How can if an old white dude could change the culture, it would have already happened if some old white dude wanted it. So, by their own logic, that can't even work. So, it's just insane to me. And plus his policies are foreign policies. His foreign policy would basically be a version of what it would be slightly more practical than Obama's version, but make no mistake, I think Biden would be more aggressive than Trump. He'd be right back into Syria. The way the Democratic Party is, they'd be pushing against the Russians hard, which means there's no way they're leaving Syria. They'd start arming the Ukraine again. And that would all be bad. That would all be bad. We need peace with everybody, especially Russia. And, we need an arms treaty, and we need peace and trade. Because once everybody's invested, then the possibility of war becomes very low. That's why we got to trade with North Korea. We got to open up those doors, just start trading with them. And that trade's going to help people. It's going to help people on the bottom. And by making them more wealthy, they become more powerful. And they're able to to move and shake within their own country, within their own local limits, which goes up. That's what capitalism does. It helps people on the bottom make enough money. Yeah, your life's not going to be perfect, but it's going to help. So yeah, I'm not a Biden fan, and I think creepy Uncle Joe. I mean, is Trump really not going to use that? He's going to say that first debate. He's going to say, "Hey, how's it going, creepy Uncle Joe?" What is Biden's comeback going to be? They're going to be Googling it nonstop. Even people who support the Democrats are just going to be like, it's cringy. Look it up. All right, that's it for the Media Podcast. My name is Tony D. I'm going to go feed Joan, and I hope you enjoy my little video. So maybe we'll keep doing these, and hopefully my politics will be consistent over the Media Podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye.